Okay. Back up. I have a question. So when you said
Mhm.
you started watching a lot of porn since young age, how young is this? Like, how old were you?
Probably like 14, 15. Definitely by the
Yeah,
time I
that's
was
not that
16.
young. I
Yeah,
feel
but
like
still, yeah.
nowadays with, because we're older, so like we had dial-up internet. But like
Mhm.
nowadays, I think kids are watching porn at like 10 years old.
Yeah, you're right. It probably is younger, and it did kind of come about with the introduction of high-speed internet.
Yeah, which
One
is
thing,
scary because
yeah,
if your story is common amongst all the young men in the world, then all these kids like of this generation that have smartphones that can access
yeah,
porn from their phone anywhere they are, like that's pretty scary of like how many young men and boys are going to be experiencing this like anxiety.
yeah. It's something that I think about too. Like the youth of our generation are at more of a disadvantage than I was, because like high speed internet wasn't around as when I was able to access it uh, at this impressionable
Right.
age. What I think is important though is that I did start watching porn prior to any sexual experiences in real life, so I think that's probably worth
Oh.
noting.
Oh, it sets the tone. It's like, oh,
Right,
this is sex. It's like the
right.
only reality you know.
Yeah, and it's yeah, exactly. It was the only reality I knew, and this went on until I finally lost my virginity at the age of 27. And
We
you
call
can,
we call it a sexual debut now.
and a sexual debut. And I know people bloomed like later than that, but you can imagine that was pretty stressful for anybody, especially considering how much pressure society puts on people, adolescents, to lose their virginity at an early age.
Especially young men, especially
Yeah,
boys. Like,
yeah,
in
like
high school, people are already kind of talking about like, oh, did you have sex? Did you have like it's like a thing where it's like a what's the word? Like popularity contest.
yeah, everyone wants to be seen as kind of like this sexual conqueror as
Right,
like
right.
as a young
Especially
adult.
boys.
Yeah, exactly. And not being able to like fulfill that fantasy for myself, it just made my anxiety worse and worse as the
Uh-huh.
years went on.
So when did you first like attempt a sexual encounter like with a girl?
Well, my first relationship was actually a long distance one, and we had a lot of phone sex, and phone sex I could, for whatever reason, I could manage that.
Right.
But my first sexual encounter where I was not able to get an erection, I think
Uh-huh.
was sometime in college, and there was probably a few, and I'm not proud of this, but I dealt with it in a very negative way, where I would kind of not blame myself at all. I would blame my partner for, oh,
Uh-huh.
she wasn't attractive enough, she wasn't what I wanted in that moment, and I was kind of like skirt any kind of responsibility and
Uh-huh.
refused to look inwardly to see if there's something I could do differently. And it kind of like just let my anxiety continue to get worse and worse for
Right. Oh my
every sexual
gosh.
encounter.
Thanks for sharing that because I think there are so many misguided men that are still that still have this toxic trait of like blaming their partner instead of
Right,
figuring out what is truly the problem for
right,
their inability to get an erection.
right. Taking some ownership or
Right,
looking
right. And just like
inwardly.
looking inward. Yeah, like
Yeah.
hey, maybe it's you. Maybe it's your sexual trauma, maybe it's I don't know, there's, for example, like yours is porn, like so maybe it's you and it's worth it to examine inward and try to understand like where it comes from so that you can work on it so that for the rest of your life you can have better sex.
Right, exactly. 100%.
So all the men out there that are blaming their partner for your inability to get an erection, perhaps look inward.
Yeah. And it's scary to do that, to look
Mm-hmm.
inwardly, because you have a tendency to like feel shame
Right.
if you
Yeah.
realize the problem might be with you. But I'm hoping that, through the course of this conversation, we can find that there's nothing really shameful about it.
No, not at all. Not at all. And I mean for women too, I know some women that tell me, I'm uh I'm ashamed or like I feel bad that I can't get wet, which is like a
Mm,
similar
yeah,
situation. Not as bad because you can still use lube and have penetrative sex, but a lot of women feel the shame of
right,
like, why can't I get wet?
right.
And it's like there something wrong with me and or like my partner is saying like why can't you get wet? Are you not attracted to me? Or, like what's wrong with your body? A
Right.
lot of women have anxiety about that. Like, why can't I get wet?
That I fully believe that. Yeah. It's like the opposite side of the coin there.
Okay, so you were in your early 20s trying to have sex, but couldn't get an erection. And then finally, like and then what happened?
So I eventually stumbled across this TED talk by this guy named Gary Wilson. I think it's titled The Great Porn Experiment. And that's where like
Yes,
it's
love that TED talk.
yeah, oh, it's excellent. I recommend everyone watch it. And that's where I learned about the Coolidge effect.
Uh-huh.
And I was in a part of my life where I had realized that humility is actually very powerful, being
Mm-hmm.
able to accept that you don't know everything and maybe you have things to learn. And I've started watching this TED talk, and like he was talking about a lot of the things that I had experienced in my adolescence and early 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wait a second, I think, this porn thing isn't doing me any favors. And so that kind of really clued me into the fact that I might have a problem with my porn usage.
Mm-hmm.
And it also helped me realize that my partners were not to blame for my inability to perform. It had to
Mm-hmm.
do with the path that I had been taking up to that point, and I was determined to try and fix it. Um, so I realized that I needed to take steps on improving myself and to overcome what could potentially be an addiction to pornography,
Mm-hmm.
and slowly wean myself off of it. And I did a few different things. I talked to some of my friends about it, got like a support network to
Mm-hmm.
tell them that this is something that I was like going through, and just opened up and was a little vulnerable to some of my friends. And a thought that kind of helped me throughout this whole process was, in my research on porn addiction in general, I found that not only just porn addiction, but like sexual anxiety is something that millions of people, as you said, deal with
Yeah.
every single day.
Yeah.
And having that understanding kind of like let me feel at ease. It's like I'm not the only one that deals with this. It's a
No,
lot of
not at
people.
all. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot of people, both men and women, as you also said. And
Mm-hmm.
so that kind of like helped me feel a little relieved that like I wasn't doing this alone.